Where else can you choose from over 300 miles of epic single track against a backdrop of soaring mountains and cascading waterfalls? And where else can you explore 100,000 acres of public lands laced with hundreds of miles of backcountry gravel roads? Your best mountain biking adventure ever begins in Brevard, North Carolina, home to Pisgah National Forest and DuPont State Recreational Forest. 4 primo bike shops will get you sorted, whether you need a rental, service, or some cool swag. Top it off with an array of craft breweries, cafes, and gathering spots that have earned Brevard the title as one of America's coolest small towns. It all adds up to one of the premier mountain biking destinations in the U.S. Find out more at explorebrevard.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks Podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guests are Joel Smith and Steele Wisdom-Wilhelmsson. Joel is the brand leader for Reserve, a Santa Cruz, California brand that designs and markets wheels for everything from downhill to road biking. And Steele is an engineering lab technician at Reserve, responsible for lab conditions wheel testing. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Yeah, awesome to be here. Thanks.
So Joel, let's start out talking about wheels. How are wheels assembled? And I'm particularly for high-end wheels, like the wheels that Reserve makes. Are they assembled by hand, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the brand's grown a lot over the years, and, we've expanded into different categories. We just started from mountain, but then went into gravel. But, the big growth for the business has actually been roadside. So we do have multiple assembly locations. So at each of those assembly locations, we do it a little bit differently. So like in Santa Cruz here, we're doing machine building and then hand finishing. We do a lot of wheels at an assembly factory in Taiwan now, and they're doing 100% hand building with a group of individuals that have been working in building wheels by hand for many, many years. Most of the guys have been doing it for over 10 years. But, what we're really trying to do, regardless of where we build them, is just a QC standard that we're trying to achieve, So we do have a factory in Mainz, Germany that's coming online this year as well. And they'll start building carbon and aluminum wheels for us. And, again, it's almost like qualifying a new vendor, but they'll be doing machine building with hand finishing like we do here in Santa Cruz. But again, the main thing is just kind of meeting the pretty high quality standard we have for the finished wheels.
Okay. So Joel, are there advantages to building a wheel one way or another? It seems like machine built, maybe are you going to get wheels that are I don't know, more precise and exact in terms of spoke tensions and stuff? Or how do you decide which process is right?
A lot of the reason we do machine building is for speed. Obviously there's a consistency element, but we're still doing, hand finishing at the end of the line on, the majority of the wheels that we machine build. So, it just depends on what that specific location is good at. Like I was mentioning, the assembly partner we work with in Taiwan, and they're really good at hand building, honestly, just kind of station individual hand wheel building. So they do that well. We do a good job of kind of this machine building and then hand finishing, So again, it's, we're trying to achieve a specific result, and, doesn't really make a difference how we get there necessarily, just depends on what the goals are that we're trying to achieve from a volume standpoint.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, Steele, I want to understand how rim construction contributes to ride feel, and particularly when we're talking about carbon rims, and people refer to that as a carbon wheel set. But when you say wheel set, really it's the rim that's made from carbon. And one of the things I'm seeing lately in the mountain bike world is that a shallower rim profile is better than a deep rim for ride feel. Is that true? Is what's kind of the state of the art in terms of rim construction and design right now?
That is, I think, the general consensus that a shallower rim profile will be more vertically compliant, as opposed to if you had a deep dish, it'd be a much more stiff wheel, which for mountain biking, compliance is great. You have more traction, more comfort. Whereas for road riding, to the deep dish, that aerodynamics come into play with that one.
Hmm.
So like a deep dish wheel will be less comfortable. You'll feel the road a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll be able to, I guess, cut through the wind a little better that way.
Huh. Interesting. Well, previously, like, why were mountain bike rims, I guess, like deeper than they are now? Was that like a manufacturing constraint, or is it just we were going from road wheels and we're trying to figure out like how are mountain bike wheels different?
I believe that is due to the strength. So a deeper profile wheel will be able to withstand harder impacts
Hmm.
as opposed to one that is low profile. It's a little more difficult to make it strong.
Yeah, when it's shallower. Like if you had a really flat rim, it's not going to be strong enough.
No, it's not going to be, might not be strong enough, but also might be too compliant.
Mm.
So you don't want a wheel that feels squishy and noodly. You won't be able to feel the trails too well.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to find a nice middle ground between too squishy and too stiff.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that is playing with that rim depth profile. And as the rims evolve, they do become lower profile. But it's kind of hard to say how much is too little, where does it get too squishy.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like handlebars, it's like everybody keeps saying like wider, wider, and at some point it's too wide. And I'm guessing there's that point for rims where it's like that's going to be too shallow.
I think so. Like, yes, with bars, of course, you don't want too wide. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to affect your riding style and how your bike handles. And the same applies to rims. We're looking for a specific ride feel.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that is the depth of the rim. Width also plays a factor in that, although there's other factors as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my side, it's pretty interesting, like looking at the history of carbon mountain bike rims. I mean, at the start, I think the primary goal was just strength, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the designs that were done in the early years of carbon mountain bike rims, you can just tell by the design it was really focused on just making it strong, so it wouldn't break.
Yeah, that was everybody's objection. They were like, no way, I'm not running carbon wheels, because they were imagining that these were just going to like explode. And so you had to kind of like overbuild them maybe to like.
Yeah, I think, it's always the case, you kind of go from one extreme to another, in the development phases. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you just have one primary objective is make it strong so you can get to the bottom of the race course,
Mm-hmm.
At a World Cup, then of course, like with that objective, you design for a specific idea only. And so like a lot of those high profile rims were just designed to be really strong. The downside of that is nobody could actually ride them. They wouldn't break, but they were also so stiff that
Right.
like by the time a guy got to the bottom of the run, he could barely hold onto the handlebars anymore. So, if you look at like that start and where we are now, I think that's where Reserve has done a really good job as, the segments are pretty nuanced these days, and we've done a good job of developing different rim profiles and rim shapes for the specific type of riding the guy's going to do, So if you look at where we are now, it's because we're trying to make them, stiff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Laterally, we're trying to make them vertically really compliant. We're also trying to make them strong enough so they don't break. So, it's just, with these years of development that we've done on them, the parameters have changed, and the segments are more nuanced. So obviously, like what the wheels are themselves and the rim shapes are quite different than what we started with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sticking with this discussion about trends, another thing that it seems like buyers these days are really tuned into is how high the engagement is on the freehub. And obviously, like the hub is a big part of a wheel. And so what are your thoughts on that, Joel? Like, is there a certain number or like amount of engagement that the average person is going to need, or is this one of those things where it's like more is better?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think so. I mean, there are some like high engagement hubs that were like clutch driven, which, gave people kind of a bad taste in their mouth about what instant engagement was going to be. But,
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective and, riding around here, when when you hit the pedals and the bike moves forward and it happens in a quick succession, it tends to be a good thing. I mean, whether you're like,
Right.
Trying to, accelerate up something on an e-bike, or you're trying to like wheelie off something that you just kind of had a no shit moment around, So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're really, kind of going all in on high engagement, in the future, and we see the benefits. So like I think, our product line, you'll see more high engagement, hubs across the lineup in the future.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about e-bikes, but that makes a lot of sense where you really want that like that instant engagement, because a lot of times you want that power like right away. And if there's any hesitation,
there can be some motor lag, as we know too, you know what I mean? So you're not just, overcoming the motor, which is your legs. You're, some of the motors actually take like a second to get going. So, if you could have a high engagement hub that like kind of eliminates some of that lag when you're trying to like snap up something like that, which it's really, really beneficial. And honestly, I know there's still some curmudgeonly industry folks who are against high engagement, but they were they're the same group were against 29ers, and they were against mullet bikes, and they were against e-bikes. And so, from my perspective, I just see it as a overall benefit, especially if you can. The new ones especially are very durable. I think that was one of the concerns with the high engagement is maybe there'd be durability issues, but all the ones that we've been testing have been really good as far as durability.
Okay. So one more trend question for you, Joel. Are wheel sizes and standards continuing to evolve? Obviously, the wheel sizes, less so, but what about rim widths? Is that, you feel like we're kind of in a place where we figured out the ideal rim width for mountain bikes?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously so dependent on where the person is actually riding, and what kind of tires they're using. I mean, obviously, cross country in Santa Cruz versus cross country in Bentonville, Arkansas, are two different things. So I would say, depending on the place the person is, maybe they have some specific tire sizes they want. But I would say in general, most trail bikes are using 2.5 or 2.6 labeled tires, which are basically seeming like the same size as most of the 2.5s, depending on the brand. And then, on XC, it's like, the 2.4s seems to be the standard tire. I mean, we do see some brands experimenting with 2.5 lightweight tires, like high volume tires on World Cup racing these days. But I would say most of the time, and if you look at our World Cup race team, they're using, 2.4, maybe a 2.4 with a 2.3 or 2.35 in the rear. So, but I do think that kind of, we're not going to be going back to 3.0 tires or that sort of thing. And I definitely don't see a situation with how the bigger tires perform of going narrower. So I do feel like we're in a better place as far as standards than a lot of the other component makers in the industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so sounds like you're saying this, obviously it's really tied to the tire width that people are running. Is that pretty settled though? Like 2.5 needs a 30 millimeter internal rim width, or is there some play there where it's like, well, maybe 29, maybe 31, 32?
I mean, I think that's our thought. I mean, like a good example is, our XC wheels, 28 XC is 28 millimeter internal width, and that width with the 2.4 tire, that seems to be the optimal XC scenario. There's enough volume. The tire's not overly flat or overly round. I mean, that's what you get when you put like a 2.4 tire on like a 22 millimeter width rim is, then it's really round. Or if you put in a 31 or 32 millimeter width internal rim, and then it's really, tends to be very flat, right? So, I just think, based on the profile of a lot of the 2.4 tires, that 28 millimeter seems like, perfect for the shape of the tire that people are running.
Yeah. Well, still, since you do a lot of lab testing of mountain bike wheels, road bike wheels, as I mentioned, in the olden days, or like when carbon was a new thing for wheels, people were worried that they weren't as strong or they were going to kind of fail in a new and dangerous way. Are today's carbon rims stronger and more durable than aluminum?
Yes, they are. I would not say that they are stronger by a huge amount, but yes, they are stronger. And part of that is the failure mode that comes into play.
Okay.
Say with aluminum wheels, if you hit a rock pretty hard, it's probably going to bend. And once you have a bent rim, there's kind of nothing you can do about it. It's going to stay there. You might be able to ride it. It might be okay for a good long while, but that bend is permanent.
Yeah.
So with carbon rims, if you hit something, it will most likely not break. It's not going to bend. Nothing's really going to happen. You might get a pinch flat. Just when it does break, it'll crack. And it takes a lot of energy to crack a good carbon rim.
Yeah.
But yeah, once that happens, it's shot. You have to get a new one, which is a bummer. They're expensive. But they will take more abuse than an aluminum rim without showing any damage.
Okay.
Until that failure point.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's the weight too. You know what I mean? It's like when you look at what you're gaining or losing in weight, you know, for that stiffness, right, and that durability. I mean, that's the real scenario where carbon is so beneficial. Is right. You get like, I mean, the negative side is obviously you're paying a lot more for the wheels. So,
right.
But you know, it's like the old scenario, right? Like you know, for every gram you lose, you know, there's an extra dollar spent, and I think that's the example for carbon wheels. It's like, just look at the strength, and like Steele was saying, you know, you look at the impact test that we do internally in the lab and you see the impact that it actually takes to crack a carbon rim. I mean, it's even every time I see it, I'm surprised actually that they will sustain the kind of damage, and you have that like strength and you have that weight, you know what I mean? So I think that's really where the benefit is. And then from a riding standpoint, that stiffness, I mean, you can't deny the overall stiffness, but then you're talking about from $700 aluminum wheel set to $1,600 on a carbon wheel set. So,
right. And I think there's also the longevity that comes into play. Over time, your aluminum wheels are going to wear down. They're going to suffer from large or little impacts and overall gain a collection of those little dents, as well as aluminum does fatigue. So after a long time of riding, you might start seeing little cracks coming from around the nipple holes, and then you have to replace the rim. It might take a long time, but it's going to happen. Whereas the carbon, so long as you don't break it, it's probably going to last you a very long time without signs of wear.
So are you able to see that in the lab, Steele? Like how many times would you like load and unload an aluminum rim before you start to see that like wear over time?
Well, we do have a wheel fatigue machine in our lab, and simply put, we load a bunch of weight on a wheel and roll it over a drum with large bumps on it for a long period of time.
Okay.
And we've done aluminum wheels and carbon wheels on this machine. The aluminum rims, yes, we will eventually see cracking around the nipple bosses. Even if the wheel survives the test overall, we will see some signs of wear. Okay. But yes, we will not see signs of wear on the carbon. Carbon does not fatigue.
So if I'm like a regular rider and I've maybe had a set of like aluminum wheels for, let's say, 2 seasons, like, am I going to start to see that fatigue at that point? Or are we talking like thousands of miles or tens of thousands of miles?
That's hard to say. It really depends on riding style. Okay. So rider weight, are they riding hard or gentle? Like there's a lot of factors in there. But yeah, generally speaking, after a couple of years, you will probably see some signs of fatigue of some kind. Okay.
And so, Joel, you obviously pointed out that there's a big weight difference between carbon and aluminum rims. But obviously the rim is like just one part of the wheel system. And so, yeah, is it significant when we're talking about like a wheel set weight versus like just comparing the rims?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the rim weight increase, you're going to get an overall, weight increase of the complete package. But, I guess when I look at the use of carbon versus aluminum wheels. For me, it's more about like what I'm intending to do rather than, like as an example, when it's really rocky and rooty, truthfully, I like riding the aluminum wheels because there's quite a bit of compliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still riding relatively aggressively, but like the harshness out of the bars, I definitely gets to me on a long downhill. So like I will use a aluminum wheel set in the case of like really rocky, really technical terrain because I want the additional compliance, If it's smoother XC style, then I'll really choose a carbon because it's not really the same parameters upon which I'm trying to kind of, what I'm trying to achieve with the end result of my riding. So, for me, it's like you get kind of caught up in stiffness and durability and all this stuff. But for me, and one of the reasons why we did aluminum wheels is there's just places where I truthfully think carbon works a lot better. And I think there's places where aluminum wheel works a lot better, regardless of like cost or weight or, those. It's just like basically what you're trying to achieve as far as your riding.
Yeah. Yeah. Pros and cons of each. And obviously there's trade-offs in whatever material you choose. I'm curious about a couple of your different wheel sets. So Reserve has the 30 SL and the 30 HD. Those are both, effectively they're like trail wheel sets, but at slightly different price points. And we see this with a lot of wheel brands where there's like, the like super expensive carbon wheel set, and then there's like the more affordable set. So I'm curious, like, what are the rims different for the Reserve wheels specifically? Are you doing like different carbon layup or using a different material, or like what separates those two wheel sets?
Well, 30 SL and 30 HD are different rim tools. You know what I mean? So the 30 HD is like coming out of a different tool. It's a thicker rim. It's got a different layup. It's got a higher strength. Mm-hmm. It's got a higher ultimate impact strength. So, the intent was that was like a indestructible trail wheel set. Mm-hmm. There's also a category of people who are riding like a Santa Cruz Tallboy, for an example, that, don't need all of that wheel that a 30 HD and would be better off on like a 30 SL. That's a good question for me because I actually find the perfect wheel set for me personally, especially around here on Santa Cruz when I'm riding like a, 150 millimeter travel trail bike, is running a HD in the rear and an SL in the front. Like I mentioned before, I like compliance, and especially in the front, the 30 SL, you feel there's a little more compliance, but then you get the strength of the 30 HD in the back. So for me, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. I understand that most people can't buy two carbon wheel sets and do that. So we're in a unique position, but it does kind of illustrate the fact that, kind of the intent of what the wheel is for and what you're trying to achieve, and we kind of make the wheel sets that like for any type of riding you want to do, we do have something that we've designed and developed for that.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Steele, what's the difference in these two, like in the lab? Is it like pretty significant between the SL and the HD rims in terms of testing?
It is fairly significant, yes, mostly in terms of strength. Of course, the HD is quite strong, whereas the SL still pretty strong, but definitely I would not recommend it for a heavy rider who likes to ride serious downhill.
Okay.
Whereas the HD, yes. And the lab results do reflect that. As far as including weight as well, the HD is a little heavier than the SL.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, yeah. How do you quantify that? Like, especially comparing those two, but maybe even comparing like a downhill wheel and a XC wheel. How do you quantify the strength? Is it like how much weight they can support? Like, what are you testing exactly?
For strength, we primarily test for impact resistance.
Okay.
So we drop a weight on a built wheel with a tire at 25 PSI. All these parameters are kept the same. The hub, spokes, tire type, PSI, that's all the same regardless of what rim we're testing. So we only switch out the rim.
Okay.
And we quantify this in, well, I guess the end numbers we're going for are joules, a measurement of energy, which we calculate by the amount of weight we dropped and how high was that weight above the wheel when we released it.
Okay. Gotcha. And what is the shape of this? Is it like a wedge shape or is it like a rock shape? Like what? I would imagine that matters, right?
It's, I guess, loosely speaking, it's kind of a rock shape.
I mean, the idea is that we're trying to replicate what we saw in field failures, right? So, like, obviously, it's very seldom that a rim gets broken, just like on a straight impact on the full rim, you know what I mean? So we designed this anvil that Steele's talking about to kind of replicate what the real world conditions are, what we were really seeing. So, it hits just like you'd hit a rock, right? Like, it drops on the side of the rim, and that's how we see the field failures come in. So actually, it's our own tests that we've designed and developed, as well as this anvil, as well as these drop test parameters. So it is our own internal test. But what we're trying to do is use the real world conditions that we've seen from field failures and trying to replicate that in the test lab, because we historically have found that that's successful in making strong rims.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry, do you have a tire on it when you're doing these tests, or are you dropping it right on?
Correct. We use a either 29 or 27.5 2.35 tire.
Okay.
Yes. And it's always at 25 PSI, regardless of what the test is.
Okay. You're right. To make it consistent. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, we always use a tire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's back to replicating like real world conditions. It's like you're not going to be like, what would be the use of doing the impact test without a tire? You're never going to be in the real world. Well, not maybe in some random downhill race, the tire might blow off the rim, but we're trying to really show what actually happens in the field. So like impact testing a rim with no tire on it, well, that's never going to happen. So, it's better to actually try to do what's happening in the field in the lab than just come up with some random parameter and trying to test rims. And I mean, we found that too. I mean, you basically can get a false negative for yourself, and you're basically proving something that doesn't have any benefit for the end consumer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, then if we are talking about real world, like what's the most common mode of failure when it comes to mountain bike wheels? Is it a rock impact, or is it fatigue? Like what usually happens to wheels that causes them to ultimately fail?
I mean, it's rock impacts on the carbon stuff. Like you just see curb impacts, rock impacts, sharp, hard surface impacts. You know what I mean?
Square edged hits.
Yeah, and it's always that same, like, there's a bin of the warranty rims, that have come back. And, I always go out there and take a look and see what kind of real world failures are. And you can just see what happened, you don't
even have to get the story. You can just look at it and be like,
went off a little jump and landed on a rock ledge, or, like missed bunny hopped the curb, right, and slammed the rim into it, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that that's what's happening, is they're hitting a hard, sharp object and, breaking the rim.
Yeah, that's interesting. I bet there are a lot of failures due to curbs. Like I bet there's like a disproportionate number of those to actual riding on the trail and blowing it up. Curbs are nasty.
Right.
Yeah.
And
actually, I think they're just riding along on a clear sunny day on a bike path. Yeah. It just happened. That's what we hear, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wants to admit it was in the parking lot. Yeah, so speaking of rim failures and these impacts, like what are both of your thoughts on tire inserts? Steele, do you ever even test those in the lab? It sounds like not, but what are your thoughts?
We have not as of yet. It's been a consideration, but it's something that has been on the back burner for a long time. We have gotten around to it, mostly because not many people use tire inserts. So it's not entirely worth it to go through all the testing for something that doesn't really get used.
Yeah, interesting.
But I believe we have in the past, and yes, they do make a difference. They do absorb some of the impact and might even save your rim. But it's not something we've really looked deeply into.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes we're really racing focused, obviously. Like that is the brand ethos is racing stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
Syndicate doesn't use tire inserts.
Mm-hmm.
None of the guys do. Even Greg never used tire inserts because he didn't like the way the wheels felt, the way the bike felt with the insert and the extra mass and the overall feel,
Right.
versus just an air tire. We don't use them in cross country racing. None of the Santa Cruz RockShox guys use inserts. Keegan occasionally uses inserts actually randomly, especially when he's doing gravel stuff. He'll run an insert in the rear, but like the on the road side, Team Visma Lisa bike, that they'll run, a Vittoria system potentially at Paris-Roubaix, but Paris-Roubaix is Paris-Roubaix. So, we've thought about it, and obviously there's a market for it, and we're a wheel brand, so we've thought about it from like the use and a commercialization standpoint. But what we found is just not that many, like Steele said, not that many people are using them. I mean, a lot of the guys even here that have bought them, you ask them like, hey, how's it going with those inserts? And they're like, well, they're still, at home,
Right.
So I do see, like if I were going to Whistler, on a week's vacation, and the top priority was not destroy my rims, I would maybe consider using a tire insert. But any other place, for us, it's like we're not using them. The teams aren't using them. It's like it's hard to get super excited and motivated for sticking this big heavy thing inside your wheel unless there's like a real need at this point.
Yeah, right. I mean, you make a good point that none of us like using them. I mean, it complicates things. The tire handles differently, all kinds of issues with it. And so it sounds like the focus then instead is like, well, let's just make sure that the rim is able to handle most of these impacts or more of these impacts rather than having to throw an insert in there.
Totally. And I honestly, I think if we were like having like a super high failure rates, we would be like, oh, well, like what could be the solution, to this?
Yeah, it'd be an easy one.
But, the sport's evolved a lot. And we're not seeing an increase in the quantity and types of failures. I mean, like you look at what a guy on a trail bike is doing today, and it's pretty crazy. You know what I mean? Everybody's riding trail bikes like downhill bikes these days, and we're not seeing like an increase in field failures. And I mean, I'm talking about the raw numbers when I look at the stats, which is, unfortunately or fortunately something as part of my job I get to do. But you look at the stats and you're not seeing increases in the amount of failure. Even like people are doing crazy stuff on trail bikes these days. So it's like, again, it's like super hard to get motivated to have the why we would spend a bunch of time. And I feel like if we always do stuff with the intent to like greatly improve whatever we're doing. I mean, Fillmore valve was a similar thing. We were aggravated with Presta valves and, low pressure flow, setting up tubeless and sealing clogging, stuff like that. So it's like we had a specific goal and a pretty, what we felt like was an important goal to try to achieve. And it's like on inserts, it's like, what would we bring to the market and what would be the benefit for the consumer? I mean, again, I'm not badmouthing them. Like literally, if I was going on Whistler on my DH bike for vacation, I would put inserts in there because I would not want to spend any downtime on my limited time dealing with a wheel issue, right? That's a pain in the ass. So, I mean, if you think about it in that respect, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a really good use, but would I ride them in Santa Cruz? No, I definitely wouldn't. It's part of the conditions and part of the terrain and part of my riding style. But, we're just not seeing great use of it here.
Right. Yeah. Well, so obviously Reserve, you guys are focused a lot, I mean, on the wheel system as a whole, but also on the rims. And related to the rims is the spoke lacing, right? Like how many holes are you drilling into these rims and how many spokes and how do you lace them comes into play. So I want to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Steele, like what role does the number of spokes and then potentially even the spoke lacing pattern play into a wheel's ultimate strength?
All right. Well, for the number of spokes, this comes down to a little bit of weight and mostly stiffness. So, of course, more spokes is more weight. Everybody wants their bike to be a little bit lighter, but you don't want to like just keep adding spokes till it's impossibly strong.
Right.
So, industry standard as of late for most mountain bike wheels is 28 spokes, and that has been kind of just decided on as this is a good level of stiffness and strength. It's a good balance between the two.
Yeah.
And keeping that number of spokes consistent helps out with production. All right, we can just do these all the same. Makes it very easy. It still puts out a very good product. And then you have, less commonly, is the 24 spokes.
Okay.
Which you'll see on like XC bikes and a lot of road bikes. So that's not going to be as strong, and it won't be quite as stiff either. It'll be a little more compliant. Sometimes that's what people are looking for too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a combination of strength and stiffness.
What about you, Joel? Like, what does that do for the ride feel? Specifically, too, like, does it matter how you lace them? Is that going to be like noticeable in terms of what you're feeling as the rider?
Well, I mean, I think an interesting use case is the aluminum wheels. We had in existence the 30 SL carbon and 30 HD carbon when we started working on the aluminum rims, and one of the interesting thing was the number of spokes, because in the end we actually ended up with 28 spokes for the 30 SL aluminums and 32 for the 30 HD aluminums. And really what we were trying to do is we were trying to have like similar category wheel sets, right? And similar stiffness for different wheel sets, where we couldn't really achieve the stiffness we wanted without the 32 spokes on the aluminum wheel. So there was a good reason to use them there. Like Steele said, I think, especially when you look at a carbon wheel today, we're only using 32 spokes on DH level stuff, where you really need the stiffness and you really need the strength, and then on the trail bikes, the carbon rims are so strong. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's the primary area of strength on them. So, having 28 spokes is more than sufficient. And obviously we're seeing that in real world applications. I mean, even so much so that like last year on the front the front wheels on V10s for the Syndicate, they were actually using 30 HD rims, 28 spoke HD rims, just for not for the really rocky tracks, but some of the smoother tracks to get some more compliance out of it. So I really think, it can be like rim design, the spoke can kind of contribute to the overall feel and the parameters you're trying to make the wheel for, so, it's just kind of depending on what you're trying to do and what kind of stiffness goals you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, for this next question, I'm really glad that I have both of you, because I think maybe there's going to be different perspectives on this. So I'm curious about Super Boost hub spacing. And, from the marketing perspective, for you, Joel, especially if you're a bike company, just to have Super Boost, it's kind of like a controversial decision because people are like, oh no, another standard. But what are your thoughts on it? Like, is it actually a better product that's going to make wheels stronger? Or are there benefits to going Super Boost if you are choosing a bike?
Well, I mean, I think better can be subjective, right?
Right.
But the key thing for me is like, yeah, you're going to get a slightly stronger wheel, right? Like for sure. Going Super Boost, but it's a minor benefit for the potential for the real negatives, which one is a new standard. I mean, I don't think if you're a consumer, dealing with standards is such a nightmare in the bike industry. I mean, when you're really trying to like build the bike up for frame or get replacement parts, and there's how many different headset standards and body
headsets are terrible
standards. It's like that alone is a huge turnoff, I think, for me personally. So again, you're getting a slightly stronger wheel, but you're a new standard, that you have to deal with. And then, just the bikes that I've actually ridden myself. I have trouble. I have big feet. I'll give you that, size 12s. And I hit my heels on the swing arm. And I will almost do anything to avoid that problem. You know what I mean? I would go back to 135 rear wheels if it meant that, I could avoid hitting my heels. I mean, that is just such a big negative. So yeah, okay. Yep. Super Boost is doing one thing and then creating a bunch of other problems. So I personally am just not seeing a big reason to go there. I mean, And then what's the next step? Do we have super duper mega boost, and we're at 180 because that's even slightly stiffer? It's like, where does it end? And I do feel like, again, Steele was talking about balance, balance is really key. And I think where we are with boost, it's like, it's the standard now. So it's not very complicated for the consumer. It's stiff, and a definitely advantage versus like 142 where we're at without kind of all the negatives that are going to, come with it. So it's just like back to cost versus benefit. I just don't see the benefit versus the negatives.
Yeah. So yeah, Steele, do you see that in any of the lab testing? Like, have you been able to compare between like a boost and a super boost wheel set? And I mean, is it noticeable in terms of strength?
Oh, it's been a while since we've tested. We have tested this before.
Oh,
it's been a couple of years at least. But yes, so downhill wheels as a whole, not just the boost spacing, the hub width, but the downhill wheels as a whole, we have tested for stiffness. So we can compare that data to your regular boost wheel. And yes, downhill wheels are definitely more stiff, both laterally and radially. And I do believe the bracing angle of the spokes is a big part of that. So you have the 148 boost or the 157 super boost,
right,
which is only a 9mm difference. It's not that much.
Yeah.
So it probably does add a little tiny bit of stiffness to the wheel, especially laterally. But I don't think it's all that significant.
Yeah.
Most of that stiffness between downhill wheels and HD, say, is mostly the rim, not the hub.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I think I do agree with Joel that adding boost and super boost and not just one does unnecessarily complicate your options.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it's not, if you're looking for a stiffer wheel, super boost is not the way to go. I mean, I think there are lots of other reasons for super boost in terms of chain line and, other things that bike brands are trying to do with that. But wheels, that's not an area where, a wheel company like Reserve is saying, oh, this would really help us make stronger wheels. Like it's not, it's more just something you guys deal with.
Right.
Well, I mean, if you just like in a vacuum asked us what the thing we would do to increase the stiffness of the wheel, that's not the first thing we would do. I'll tell you
That's
that.
not it.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So Joel, I want to ask you about mountain bike wheel warranties, particularly from sort of the branding and marketing side. That's obviously a big part of any carbon wheel set is the warranty that the brand offers. Do riders, though, do they actually make a lot of claims? Like, is this something that like is a good value for people, or is it more just like something that they probably won't have to take advantage of, but that, gives them peace of mind?
Yeah, I mean, you hope you did all the work, right? That you're not having rims that are failing in the field, and I mean, all this testing that Steele does, and, we haven't really talked about it in detail, but there's a lot of internal testing that we do and lab tests that we set up for ourselves, that are based on real world conditions and what we've seen in the field that we actually know make an impact in, the reliability of the wheel for the customer. At the same time, our whole brand premise is lifetime warranty. I mean, we do it on the aluminum wheels. We do it on Fillmore valve. We do it on the carbon rims. Our whole brand was based on trying to build a carbon rim that would support a lifetime warranty. Like that's how we came to fruition as a wheel brand is trying to make a strong enough rim that we believed in that could support a lifetime warranty. So I personally love it because it gives us this high level of confidence, and you're shooting for the stars instead of, right? Like you're going for the ultimate thing instead of like some base measurement, So, when you have a design, you have a manufacturer, you have testing in place that can support a lifetime warranty, you have a high level of confidence. I think that confidence, obviously for a customer, I do think there's some worry from customers today that, things will break and things do break, and I think we've done such a good job over the years of providing real lifetime support to customers and be reasonable people and, treat people who who come to us with warranty problems as if they were us and we want to get them resolved and get them riding. And I do think that we kind of set the standard in the bike industry as far as wheels and lifetime support. Everybody changed their warranty policies after we did it, especially, it's kind of laughable on aluminum wheels. Everybody was telling us, you can't do lifetime warranty on aluminum wheels. And we did it. And then everybody else followed, but I do think it's just, for us, it's part of our brand promise. It's part of our brand ethos. And we do get riders who come to us with claims, actually relatively consistent every year, which tells us we're doing a good job, designing rims. And you hope not to create problems for customers, because, if somebody breaks a rim, it's still a pain in the ass, right?
Right.
So you're trying to avoid that. But, it's just such an import of the brand. I think overall it does us such a good job of explaining what we are.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost sounds like you're saying that the warranty is sort of a proxy for the quality and the confidence that a brand has in their wheel set, right? Like, you're not, if you're a consumer and you're trying to decide between two wheel sets and you're looking at the warranties and you're like, well, this one's lifetime, but this one is lifetime, but doesn't cover crashes or whatever. So really, you're not comparing warranties. What you're comparing is, how confident is the brand in their product, and not necessarily like assuming that you're going to have to actually use the warranty.
That's exactly right. It's just the word you said is when you were talking there, I was like, confidence. You know what I mean? It's like we have confidence, gives the consumer confidence, gives our rider support people confidence, gives our dealers confidence, it gives our salespeople confidence, because we just are standing with kind of this flag in the sand, saying like, yeah, we believe in what we do. This is a super important aspect, to give customers confidence, and we feel very confident in what we're providing the customers.
Yeah. Steele, are you involved in the warranty process at all in terms of testing?
A little bit. I will sometimes receive wheels that have been broken under maybe some questionable circumstances. Who knows how it happened? So, all right, they'll send this back to me. I will inspect the carbon layers or the failure method or how it broke.
Yeah.
And give some feedback on, okay, was this rim, was it defective, or was this maybe more rider error? And I can give some information on that based on my lab experience.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like you're like CSI for like rim failures.
Essentially,
like,
yes.
Somebody drive over this with a car, or did they launch off a thing, or Yeah,
and sometimes it's fairly obvious. Like, all right, yes, somebody definitely smashed this. I have seen rims that have been ran over by cars. All right, this is definitely not our fault. Or occasionally, very, very rarely, I'll see a rim where maybe there's like a void in the carbon. And okay, this is a manufacturing error. Let's get this person a new wheel.
Interesting.
Steele, I got a question for you. When I come back to the lab and I'm carrying a bunch of rims that have cracks in them, are you scared of me at that moment? Or
No, not at all. That's exciting for me. All right, I have something interesting to do. I get to take these apart. I have to cut them up, get out the camera, take some real good close-up pictures. This is fun.
Yeah, Jeff, this is a pretty typical scenario as I'm dragging a rim back into the test area to Steele, because honestly, I'm curious. You know what I mean? Like, I think every warranty case, I'm like not like so proud that, we make the best rims, which I do think we do, but I'm like, what happened here? Like what is the thing that occurred here? You know what I mean? So we can evaluate and make improvements. And most of the time it's just like a curiosity. And then Steele and I are talking like, whoa, look at that. That's super interesting. What was that heat that he did there? Was it a defective rim? Like, maybe it was a carbon layup issue. Maybe it wasn't, so I do think it's like a little bit of true crime detective work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That Steele does. But when I wander back there, I'm always thinking, oh God, Steele's wondering what I have planned for him for today.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys should make a video of Steele, like in the lab, make it like a CSI spoof of him, like investigating these wheels. It'd be funny.
Hey, we could do that.
Well, finally, Joel, I want to ask you, what's kind of your bottom line advice to mountain bikers when they're choosing a wheel upgrade? Is it all about like buying the most expensive wheel you can get? Is it like carbon is the right thing for everybody? Like what advice do you give to people when they want to upgrade?
No, as I kind of alluded to before, it's like buying for your needs and your style. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're riding like once a month, you honestly you don't need the $2,500 carbon wheels.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not your primary objective. And you're not doing it, son. But at the same time, it's like if you're riding 7 days a week, I'd spend the money on the best wheel set you can possibly get. I mean, there is a difference in, based on the cost, and also the kind of riding you're trying to do, like, as I mentioned before, like when it's really rocky and really, really rooty, I tend to prefer the aluminum wheels because of the added compliance. So, I would say, don't overspend for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you can get caught in a trap where you think just spending money is the solution to the problem. But
Right.
at the same time, underspending isn't good either. You know what I mean? You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to buy a set of wheels from whichever brand that's not going to, provide the durability you need. And then you're just buying more of stuff and you're spending a lot of downtime dealing with it. And that's not good. So, I would say, really, really try to understand what your goals are, and then try to spend and buy the wheels that are appropriate with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, awesome. That's great advice. Well, Joel and Steele, thank you both for taking the time to chat and answer some of our questions about mountain bike wheels. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy.
It's been great. Thanks, Jeff.
Awesome. Well, you can find more information about Reserve Wheels at reservewheels.com. That's all we've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.